where she summarizes the situation. A good piece, well done. Except she talks about freedom of the press, and she mentions La Prensa, and she does not mention the fact that it was funded by the CIA during this whole period.
And they were pro-Contra during the whole period.
Oh, absolutely. A CIA propaganda piece to destabilize the country, to create
during
panic.
A war, no less, when they were fighting for their survival.
She should have mentioned that. It's a good article. I compliment her, but still, that little detail, and then she doesn't project it further. The Meldon plan isn't mentioned. Where the ambassador was funding during the height of peace talks and the Contras and amnesty. The embassy was caught funding people and organizing them to agitate into violence, to provoke.
The U.S. Embassy was funding
Ambassador
Nicaraguan opposition. Let's focus on this Contra thing for a while. I read today in the New York Times that the Bush administration seemed to be surprised that the leaders of these Central American governments had the audacity to shut down the Contras, to tell them they had to leave Honduras. Evidently, the Reagan-Bush administration thought they'd cut a deal with the Honduran government that the Contras could stay there as long as money was being funneled into Honduras. And evidently, the Bush administration was caught by surprise with this meeting and doesn't exactly know how to react. How do you read this situation?
Well, it reminds me of an old saw, the bandy in the third world, saying you can rent us sometimes, but you can't buy us. And every time the Honduran generals would need, put some more money in their bank accounts, they would talk about throwing the Contras out. And it is an embarrassment to them. Flagrant violation of all of their own internal laws and the international agreements in Central America. And but each time they would propose to close down the Contra bases, Reagan would hit them with another 20 mil in cash to the generals and quiet them down for another year. And I would have to say that either the forces of peace in Central America are sufficient that Honduras really is trying to get rid of this embarrassment, or the generals want another payment.
Do you think the Bush administration will try to buy them off? How would they do it? Would they have to go to Congress for money, or could they just siphon?
Well, they have all kinds of contingency funds, and you can, 20 million they could squeeze out. But let's watch and see. Is Reagan going to hit the Honduran government with a lump of money, or is he going to let them close down the Contra bases?
Well, what is the military situation with the Contras? I gain the impression that the Contras have pretty much closed down in terms of interventions into Nicaragua, that for a while they were quite an active fighting force, but that this is pretty much wound down now. Is it that they're demoralized, they've left the region, they don't have the funding and supplies? What is the situation?
No, disintegration. 2 years ago, the Sandinistas were giving them credit for some pretty serious activity in up and down through the country, reaching pretty far in. They were not standing up to the Sandinistas in any pitched battles, but their raids and hitting and running, there was quite a bit of energy. Now there are occasional atrocities measured, inside Nicaragua, where there apparently a band here or there, but the leadership has collapsed. They have a sense the U.S. is going to drop funding them, that we've shut down the great air wing that was funding them through the drug money. The leaders are looking for everybody scurrying to make sure they have some money in the bank so they can retire. And those soldiers that were, expected to go and live in the jungle without being resupplied, without the planes coming in to get them, the thing is probably down to 5% or less of the energy that they had 2 years ago. And then the talk about just disbanding the camps altogether. And this is enough of the little things, signals you look for here and there that, what's really going on. Reagan, in his last couple of months, commented that the United States should be willing to accept the Contras up here. And that's pretty much of an admission on his part that, that they have to go somewhere.
Boy, that's something that just galls me. Every time there's the U.S. or the CIA lose a big one, we bring in all of these murderers and dope dealers and people who've committed horrible butcheries and atrocities. We welcome them back into our country, where they continue to do the same thing here.
Which is precisely, isn't it, the issue down in South Texas right now, the so-called Nicaraguan refugees coming up here, the ones who are supposedly fleeing the Sandinistas. These were clearly Contra supporters. And the U.S. has not really got that clear a policy. In fact, the only group that we just totally welcomed was the Cuban exile group that we had run from Florida. That has been a constant embarrassment to the United States government and the source of a major upheaval in crime and drug smuggling. And there's quite a block of sane people in this country, not of our politics, but nevertheless sane, who are saying, we don't want them up here.
We don't need another mafia. We have a Vietnamese mafia, a Cuban mafia.
I mean, some of them have read Christopher Dickey's book, you know, with the Contras, about his patrol, about Las Suicidas, just this incredible vendetta and orgy of violence down in the country. And no, we don't want these people up here. But you see, the Honduran government doesn't want them either. You remember
Maybe we can make them astronauts and shoot them out into space.
The Kurds, they call it the disposal
Sent
problem.
to Afghanistan.